Good. Believe I drew the short straw today, so I'm going to go through the housekeeping slides. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our June North America Marketo virtual user group. I'm Chris Willis, along with my co-conspirators who organize our event. So Jackie and Andy Carone. So we're really glad that you've joined, and we're excited about the content that we'll be sharing today. So a few house rules, and if you've attended this mug, the Marketo Champion office hours, any other mug, these are not unfamiliar. Essentially, we want this to be a safe space where we can talk about best practice uses of Marketo Engage, explore each other's use cases, and do it in a very safe place. So we ask that no self-promotion or pitching of any kind. So these are humans interacting with humans. So don't contact people outside of their consent of the user group. And those, essentially Vegas rules around use cases. What's said in the user group stays in the user group. So we want, you to feel confident and comfortable with sharing your use cases, especially with, the content and the power behind some of the technology will be shared today. This user group meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can feel free to, keep your camera off, your microphone off. But just know if you do join on camera and speak that this is being recorded, it will be available on the Marketo Mugs YouTube site at a later date. So if you want to be connected and get information about future user group events, definitely register for our chapter on Bevy. So just go to mugs.marketo.com, North American virtual mug, and subscribe, and you will get communication about future events as we have them. We're trying to do something at least once a quarter with good educational and business value content. A little update on upcoming user group events. So these are the user group meetings that are scheduled within North America. So if you live within one of these regions or they're offering a virtual experience, definitely feel free to sign up for some of these. There's some really good content that's being offered over here. And then, of course, for international, for those in Europe, the European Mug will be doing a similar user group session about making smarter MarTech decisions on the 26th. And as you can see, we've got some really good activity in our Asia Pac areas. So last but not least, join Experience League. If you are not signed in, feel free to take a picture of the QR code and get yourself signed up for Experience League and get access to all of that great content and community there. And review us on G2 and Trust Radius. We definitely appreciate your positive reviews. I know the Marketo team definitely appreciates all the positive reviews from raving fan customers like yourselves and the three of us on these sites. So without further ado, I will introduce you to my friend Batman, otherwise known as Josh Arrington, who will be presenting on self-service flow steps. And Josh, go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Let me take over the screen. Yeah. Perfect. See my screen? Great. Thank you, Chris. Hi. As Chris said, my name is Josh Arrington. I'm Chief Marketing Technology Officer for Kapturall. We're a Marketo agency based in Spain. I know this is the North American mug, but based in Spain. I'll be back in Boston next week, though, so getting ahead of it. I've been working with Marketo for over 16 years now, and this year I'm honored to be a member of the Champion program for the second year in a row. I am a certified Marketo architect and full stack developer, and I tell you all this to introduce myself, but of course, also to give you some perspective on the topic for today, which is self-service flow steps. As I mentioned, I've worked with Marketo for 16 years and I'm a developer. So pretty versed in the system, in the API. I've probably built 1,000 different custom integrations and webhooks, but self-service flow steps have changed everything for me. They are hands down the most powerful tool I've seen released from Marketo. And that's the reason I'm so excited to talk about them today, and also go into depth on a few examples and use cases that you can use. So a little quick overview of what I'm going to cover. First, what is a self-service flow step? I'm going to give some background on the differences between self-service flow steps and webhooks. Then some great use cases for using these tools, including one specific flow step that you can use today, which is compute formula flow step. I'll go over how to deploy that flow step and some specific use cases for using it. Then I'll cover some just basic tips and tricks, and we'll go over some key takeaways, and finally open up for questions. So, as I said, what is a self-service flow step? Flow steps are custom actions that we can add to our Marketo instance. As Marketo users, I'm sure you're familiar with the list of standard flow actions that you see here. They are available on any smart campaign. Actions like change data values, send an email, or change program status. But what happens when these actions aren't enough? What if we want to do something beyond what's built into Marketo, like send an SMS or validate an email address or send a prompt to an AI? Well, up until recently, the only option was webhooks. And webhooks are definitely useful, but they also come with a lot of limitations. And this is why self-service flow steps are a massive upgrade from webhooks. We are now able to create any kind of action that we want to add into our Marketo instance without any of the limitations we face with webhooks. So you just heard me say that flow steps are a major upgrade from webhooks. But what do I mean by that? Well, to start, if you're familiar with the webhook flow step, then you know that it looks like this, that you only get one generic flow action and one field where you just choose which webhook you're calling. Self-service flow steps, on the other hand, are purpose-made. They are labeled, they have labels saying what it's going to do. They have fields that are tailored to the action that you're taking. Here you can see I have a flow step that sends a prompt to AI and saves the response. I have a field for prompt. I have a field for model that I can choose specifically for my flow. But that's just on the surface. Under the hood, there are several other key differences that make flow steps hugely forward from webhooks. They work in batches, they have customized fields, they have dynamic lookups, and an easy-to-use interface, much better than webhooks. They run asynchronously, which we'll discuss later, and they wait for the response before continuing a flow. But what does that all mean for us? Well, let's look at some use cases. Imagine you have a network of gyms with many locations and thousands of members. And say you want to send an SMS out to all of your members about a big event. Yes, you can use a webhook to send a text message, but if you have thousands of members, how are you going to send that from Marketo? Well, first, webhooks can't be run in batch campaigns. So if you try to run in a batch, you'll get this error. And some of you might say, but there's a workaround. We can just trigger a campaign and call it from a batch campaign uh, and trick the system. But then you end up with something like this. The request will time out, and worse yet, from Marketo, you won't actually know if the SMS was sent or not, because a timeout error does not mean that the SMS wasn't sent. It just means that Marketo doesn't know what happened. And that happens because webhooks are sent individually, but all at once. So uh, if you send 10,000 leads, it makes 10,000 different requests. And they only wait 30 seconds for a response. So if you send 10,000 requests, it needs to respond to that within 30 seconds. Steps, in contrast, are sent in batches of 1,000. So for 10,000 members, it just becomes 10 batches of 1,000, which is much easier for a server to handle. And there's no time limit. The request is sent along with a return URL. And whenever the response is ready, it can be passed back to Marketo. So bottom line, large batches are a big issue for webhooks, but not a problem at all for flow steps. So then say each month you want to send out an email with a recap of your user's gym activity. You can create a flow step for getting that information from your backend system and then putting that into the body of an email with a token. With flow steps, flow like this will automatically wait for that response to get back before sending the email. But that's not the case for webhooks. If you tried this exact same flow with a webhook instead, you would most likely end up with an empty email, or you would need to figure out some kind of workaround to trigger that email. But what if the member, so for sending a recap, what if the member doesn't have any activity in the past month? That would be a sad recap. So maybe we should send them a motivational reminder instead to get back to the gym. How can we do that? Unlike webhooks, flow steps also come with their own unique activities where we can store information about the action, even if it's not stored in the lead field. So we can use those activities and attributes in triggers and filters in Smart Campaigns. So here we can just add a filter for member activity and or member activity updated and use number of visits as the constraint. So if it's greater than 1, we go ahead and send the recap. But if it's 0, we can trigger that motivational, we want you back in the gym message instead. Another massive benefit that flow steps have over webhooks is dynamic dropdowns, which can get their information from a backend service. So for example, imagine, again, you have this gym network and you've created a flow step to activate memberships in the backend system. With a large gym network, you may open and close gym locations regularly. So you want to keep your location list up to date. With flow steps, you can have this be a dynamic dropdown like this that pulls from your backend system, so it always shows you the current active locations. This data is automatically updated every 24 hours, but by default, but you can also update it manually from the admin section. And this allows just to just keep data and settings fresh. And unfortunately, webhooks don't have any similar functionality. So that said, let's look at a few use cases for how we can use self-service flow steps. First, as you saw before, generative AI has many practical uses inside Marketo. So we can use self-service flow steps to connect to an AI model, pass it a prompt, and get a response back. And we can use this for many things like lead scoring, data categorization, sentiment analysis, or even create hyper-personalized email content. Next, we can use them for deduplication. Marketo doesn't have a built-in dedupe action that we can trigger in a Smart Campaign, but with self-service flow steps, we can create our own and then connect to it through our Smart Campaign. Next, custom objects are another super powerful feature in Marketo, but they don't have any native flow actions. But with self-service flow steps, we can build our own actions. So we can create, update, delete custom objects directly inside of our Smart Campaigns. Another area where flow steps can be used and be super useful is lead enrichment. Many of these services like LinkedIn, Dun & Bradstreet, ZoomInfo, they have API connections, so they have their own service that connects to Marketo, but you have to log into their system to control it. You have to run batches. It's not very user-friendly, and you have to leave Marketo, which I don't ever want to leave Marketo. So they also don't, it just doesn't give you the ability to control it. But with the self-service flow step, we can use it directly inside Smart Campaigns, only trigger it when we want to trigger it, and again, never leave Marketo. With self-service flow steps, we can also create connections to external databases and systems to sync data and activity. This can be especially useful for integrations where you want better control over that sync and to avoid using API calls. Self-service flow steps don't use API calls at all. We can use self-service flow steps to expand on our existing CRM integrations, or if there's a native integration, build an integration. So we have built-in actions for the CRMs like send to CRM or create a task, but with self-service flow steps, we can create more actions like create or update opportunities or accounts, or basically any object in the CRM. You can also use them to expand alerts beyond emails and send messages to Teams or Slack or Discord, and even make them interactive to create a dynamic process to create, for example, approval workflows works really well. So that brings us to the compute formula. So let's dive into this one specific flow step and that you can install and start using today. There's no code needed, and over the past 16 years, honestly, I've often wished that Marketo had a formula flow action or the ability to calculate formulas. I have many times had to export data and do calculations in Excel and re-import lists, and I'm very happy not to have to do any of that anymore. So Adobe has provided the code for a compute formula flow step that you can deploy in Adobe I/O and install inside Marketo directly. So I'm not going to go into the details of how you set that up, but deploying the code is a little technical, but not difficult. You just kind of have to go through step by step. And I will give a step-by-step guide as a QR code to make it super simple. Basically, it's just 3 steps. You download the code, you upload it into Adobe I/O, which is where it lives and runs, and then install it into Marketo. And it takes about 30 minutes end to end. And again, you don't need to know or touch any code. It's just a one-time thing that once it's set up, it's in your Marketo instance and you can use it. Here you have that QR code, and I will put that up again at the end for you to get, but that's for the step-by-step guide. You do need developer or system access in Adobe MS, as well as an Adobe I/O account, which I also didn't know anything about when I started, but if you contact your Adobe rep, they can get you set up and going. As I said, you don't need to know any code, but if you are a developer, of course, you can modify it however you want. And the code that Adobe's given runs in Adobe I/O, but you could deploy it anywhere. So if you're using Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, wherever, you can deploy it. So once it's installed, it will appear as an option to, again, to add to your smart campaigns in the flow. It has a formula field and 2 return fields. 2 return fields are depending on if you're expecting text or a number back. The formulas it uses are from a library called Formula.js. So you can go on their site and see all the functions available. And they're very similar to Excel if you used Excel formula functions, but you'll see some of them are slightly different. So it's good to go on there and test it and use that tool. And all of this is in the step-by-step guide. So what can we do with this new toy? Let's look at a few use cases. Let's say you're working at a university. You have many potential students visiting your website, and you've created a score in Marketo for each major that the university offers. And you score people based on how they interact with your content, of course. However, now you want to run a campaign and you want to personalize the campaign based on the top major of interest for each student. How can you calculate which is their top choice? Well, with the formula flow step, we can easily compare all of the scores to find the highest and then store the major name in a top interest field. Here you can see we've placed the formula in the correct field, and then we've selected top interest field as our return string, since the value we passed back as text. Then we just need to run our smart campaign. And here you can see how the sample of students would be placed. Then say you're on the other side. You work for a company and your sales team starts complaining about the lead quality, saying that there are too many students. You look into it and realize that there are a lot of students downloading all of your content, but they're just doing research for term papers and have zero intention of buying. Now your scoring model is too heavily weighted towards people's behavior, the downloading, and not putting enough weight toward their demographic score. You can update your scoring model, but what do you do about the scores that are currently in your system? You could export a list, do a calculation in Excel, and then re-upload the new scores, but that's a pain, and it's not really the MOPS way. So we want to automate this. I want to just run a smart campaign and be done. So that's where this formula, compute formula flow step comes into play. With a simple formula, we can combine the two scores, change the weight of the behavior score to say 30%, and create a weighted composite score. And this is just one example, but now since we have the formula flow step, we can play around with the weights all that we want. No need to change the underlying model or scores or exporting and importing. It's as easy as running a smart campaign and you're done. Let's look at another one. Say your sales team comes back and says, lead quality is great now, but they want you to evenly distribute all of the leads across the sales team. How can you do that? With the formula flow step, it's easy. We know that Marketo lead IDs are sequential. So as new leads come into the system, we can use the mod function or a remainder function with the lead ID and the number of sales reps that we have. So if we have 5 sales reps, we can use mod 5, shown here, and this will just give us a round robin seed number between 1 and 5 for every lead ID. Then we can use that seed number to assign the leads to a given sales rep with a change owner flow step, and then a choice for each seed number / sales rep. Now new leads that come into the system will be evenly distributed across the sales team, just with this. So I've given you 3 use cases for the formula, but we only have so much time. So let's do a little rapid fire. First, text capitalization. You can use this formula flow step to capitalize names or format text easily across your database, which is great. Same thing in Excel. Next, sometimes you want to obscure data like an email address. We use this sometimes with our preference center. If you have someone accessing the page from a link um, or somewhere that other than an email, you can show them that you know who they are by showing them part of the email address, but not specifics. Next, lookup has a million great uses. For example, here we can set the country code based on the country. Next, we can calculate completeness of a lead record given a set of key fields. We can then get a percentage of completeness on if those fields have a value. Next, if we have a score field for opens and a score field for clicks, then we can easily divide them to calculate the click-through rate. And that's not an email click-through rate by email, but by the lead level. So we can see how an individual is interacting with our content. And finally, we can use the formula to extract a person's company domain from their email address, which can be very useful for many things, for matching people by company or by looking up MX records to find out, for example, what email client they use before you send an email. So there's several use cases, but really that's just the tip of the iceberg. The possibilities are truly endless. And I promise if you install this flow step, you will be amazed how often you're using it. And that's not just for big complex formulas, but really just the most mundane things that in the past have stopped you and blocked you from your campaigns. It's a super powerful tool. Again, this is their site. You can see all the functions that are available and use this tool for testing any of your formulas before you use them. So just a few tips and tricks for using the formula flow step. First of all, don't use an equal sign like you would in Excel. It's not needed. When using tokens, unless the token is a number, make sure you wrap it in single quotes or apostrophes. Next, test all of your formulas before putting them into practice. Use that tool from the site. again, the flow step it's built on a library called Formula.js. So if you just go to that site and you can test the formulas and also see a list of functions that are available. And finally, I would recommend using AI to come up with solutions. If you just tell ChatGPT what data you have and what you want to do, and just let it know you're using Formula.js, it can often come up with the perfect formula very easily. But again, just be sure to test them because the AI does like to invent its own functions. So make sure they're real first. And now just a few key takeaways. First, identify your use cases for self-service flow steps. Take a look at your current processes and integrations and find where custom flow steps can give you more control or help overcome current limitations. A good place to start is to review your current webhooks, look at your existing webhooks and integrations, and then identify where there's blockers, right? And where you can benefit from the flow step and replace and streamline those processes. Also, reviewing any process that require you to log into another system to manage. These can be a great opportunity to bring that functionality directly into Marketo with the self-service flow steps. Next, deploy and install the formula flow step. Next slide will be that QR code again. Follow the step-by-step guide. Again, it only takes about 30 minutes, but it can save you a significant amount of time and effort down the line. You only have to do it once. And actually, the rest of these are specific to the compute formula flow step, but they apply to everything. Next would be train your team. It's important when you add a flow step, especially the formula one, to empower your team by training them on how to use it, how to use the flow step, as well as common use cases that they can leverage it for, get feedback from them. And once you have it, you'll be surprised how often you're using it and how people use things. After that, test everything, especially so this specific example, test formulas, experiment with different formulas, try out new ideas, and just see how creative you can get with what's possible. So with that, I will throw this QR code. There's two here. One's the step-by-step guide. And if you are a developer, the QR code on the right is a great article put together and video put together by Tyrone, who went into depth on how to create a self-service flow step and what goes into it. I will also be releasing within the next week or two a guide for how to create a zero code self-service flow step. So hopefully that will be super useful for people. And I will go ahead and say I'll break the rules at the beginning for my own presentation. Feel free to use any of these use cases and feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. But for now, I guess just questions. I have a, so I see,
Question from Deborah. I have a webhook that's limited to 500 calls per second. Can that configuration be modified? And feel free to come off of mute and raise your question. Like, definitely want this to be conversational.
Okay,
yeah,
Chris.
so it sounds like if you already have the webhook and the limitation is 500 calls per second, this would be a great use case. So the self-service listener would call just once with a batch of 1,000 at a time or several batches of 1,000. Um, and then if you have a service in the middle that kind of handles whatever you're doing, so it can basically throttle those requests to whatever end service you're using, so to make sure that it doesn't go over that limit. And also, if it does go over that limit and it gets an error back, that it retries so that you get all of the responses back. And the great thing about self-service flow steps is there's no time limit. So as soon as it's going to go throttle, it can take as long as it wants, go slowly. And when all the responses are received for that batch of 1,000, then it can pass them back to Adobe or to Marketo, again, with no time limit. Is there any additional cost associated to any of this? Do we have to sign up for a specific Adobe service to make use of it? There's no cost for using self-service post-ups. It's built into every Marketo instance. It's available to everyone. The only cost that could be is you have to host it somewhere. So you talk to your Adobe reps, sometimes uh, there is an Adobe IO account built in that you just need to get access to. And then I think if you have Marketo Engage, that's included. Don't quote me on that. Talk to your rep, but you can host in there and it's included. If you wanted to use another service, like if you wanted to host in Azure, Google Cloud, or Amazon, AWS, there would be some cost associated with hosting it there. But typically, if I would recommend using like a serverless function type of architecture or serverless architecture, and the cost is going to be very low unless you're talking about hundreds of millions of requests.
I'm going to go ahead and shut off the recording now too, so that anybody can jump in and ask questions that way too.